Good morning. Welcome to our study this morning. It is our ninth on chapter 2, verse 9 of the Revelation. We're actually looking at the section of that verse that reads, "I know the blasphemy of those who say they are Jews and are not." I have chosen to spend time on this verse because as I was preparing the study of the book of Revelation, what I noticed was the large sequence of deceptions that took place, that combined with the statement by Yahua, Jesus, to the disciples when they asked him what would be the sign of his coming and the end of the age. And the first words out of his mouth were, "See that no one deceive you." He marked the end of the age and the signs of his coming to be characterized by deception. So taking that, when we came to chapter 2, verse 9, and I saw this, I said, this has to be the reason that it occurs so quickly in the book of Revelation. And it is mentioned in Acts 24 and I think Luke 16, that it's got to be very important. So we should try to examine it, track down those who say they are Jews and are not. So that's led me on quite a search. There are, I guess, as an introductory statement, I can say, essentially, you can have those who say they are Jews and are not being Gentiles who are not Jews, but say they're Jews. We have quite a bit of that going on today in the Messianic Christian movement, where people are claiming to be part of the lost 10 tribes, even though they have no genetic evidence of that. So that's one group. We have those who are the genetic offspring of Noah's children, but not Shem, the children of Ham and Japheth, and they cannot be Jews because Judah is not in their line, and Ashkenaz is in the line of Japheth, but no Judah in the line of Ham or Japheth. So then you have those who are born Jews who have genetic connection to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob being Israel, but yet they have left their faith and are practicing some other religion, some other belief system than Judaism, and we'll cover that in our last section, which will be week after next. Next week, we're going to look at these people in the formation of Israel. We're introducing that somewhat today, but we're going to do a big one on the formation of Israel and look at them there and who is in charge in Israel today. And then the following week, we will do the New Testament passages that identify the Jews and who are not Jews. So anyway, we've been on a long chase, and let's start with prayer, and then we'll just get into the text itself. Father Yahua, we are grateful for your word. We're grateful that you have given us your word as a standard for understanding truth. And as we search for this truth, we ask that the Spirit guide us by the teaching of your word. We might recognize what is truth even when it's not specifically a verse that we're studying. We thank you. Bless our time together in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen. Okay, let's see what works. I need to go to this one. Okay, we've been looking for the possible candidates found in Revelation 2:9. I know the blasphemy of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan. And in Revelation 3:9, behold, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say they are Jews and are not, but lie. Behold, I will make them come and bow down before your feet, and they will learn that I have loved you. So let me go over here and turn on this projector. Guess you want me to fix this projector too, don't you? Or either that or you can sit crooked. Okay. All right. Now everything is good here in the classroom. So these are the two passages that show up in the letters to the congregations, the synagogue congregations of the Middle East, of Turkey, and are of course the impetus for our study. Okay, let me get back to this one. And let me get this device into this computer now. And then we can see yeah. We then attempted to follow the 12 sons of Israel as they were dispersed throughout the Middle East and Europe to find clues, specifically who are the real bloodline of the Jews. We saw the golden age of Jewry in Spain under the Muslims. We saw the resettlement of Jewish slaves in Germany after the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. We looked at the east to west and west to east dispersions. And lastly, we saw the migration into Poland and the Ukraine. We noted their educational advantages and how it placed them in the highest positions in government and society, and the push of the upper class Jews to integrate Jewry into secular society and thus integrate secular society into Judaism. 2 Timothy 3:13 says, while evil people and impostors will go on from bad to worse, deceiving and being deceived. You see, if you turn, oh boy, I'm going to take a chance here. Huh? Don't take a chance. I see how you are. Oh, where are we here? Well, first of all, let me see which of these laptops is connected. Not, well, that one is connected. Let's see if I can go ahead and get to good notes that way. There we go. Okay, good notes, untitled draft right there. Okay, here we go. You can see if you're going to take a, let's call it Judaism. And what are the two requirements to be a Jew? Number one, bloodline. Okay. You have to be a genetic offspring of Jacob, Israel. Okay. And then in order to be a specific Jew, Judah, the tribe of Judah, then you would have to be an offspring of Judah, who was one of the sons of Israel. And so, but you have to have that blood connection. And two, you have to have faith. You know, we have spent a lot of time demonstrating that there is more to the New Testament and Old Testament descriptions of the dispensations, the different groups, that the body of Christ is not part of the kingdom, that the kingdom is Jewish, that the body of Christ is not. It is composed of any Jews who believe today and any Gentile who believes today form the body of Christ, and we're not of the Jews. Okay, we could be those people who are not Jews but say we are, if we were of that nature, of that the way I see it, if we were of the synagogue of Satan. But we have to notice that a lot of the passages, a lot of the scriptures that have traditionally in Christendom been applied to us as the body of Christ have been erroneously have erroneously been done so. So if we look and we go back to the Old Testament, where'd that come from? All right, let's just go back to this. If you think about it, we are different than the Jews, but a lot of the characteristics of Judaism, kingdom, and the body of Christ are not only similar, but are the same. So if you go back into the Old Testament, it says, the just shall live by faith, by faith. And as we'll see coming up week after next, Paul says not all who say they are Jews are Jews, because it's a belief system. It's not who you're born by. Remember that the Jews came to Jesus and said, we are the children of Abraham. And he said, no, you're the children of your father, the devil. You are of the synagogue of Satan. So these are the people who are imposters. They base their Jewishness on their genetics and not on their faith, and it requires both. It requires both. When God tells was it Isaiah that I have 7,000 who have not bowed the knee to Baal, to the false god, they were all Jews. So it wasn't that he picked out 7,000 who were really genetic Jews. It's those who were genetically Jews and by faith were Jews also. So we have to have the blood and the faith in order to be a real Jew. Okay. So if you take Judaism and you substitute, you take Judaism and you substitute genetics, then you would be one who says you are a Jew but are not, because you don't have the blood, you don't have the genes. So that's one of the groups that cannot be Jews. No blood, no bloodline, no genetic structure that relates them to Israel, to Jacob. The other is those who without faith. So if you don't have the bloodline, you can't be, but if you don't have the faith, you can't be either. You can't be a true Jew either. So if you take to Judaism and you say, okay, we don't care about the genetics. We'll use a letter G there, and then we don't care about genetics. You can be a Jew without the genetics. Of course, you can if you convert to Judaism, but we're eliminating that as the possibility right now. Or they're saying that faith thing, every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God, you don't have to have that. You can be a socialist. You can be a communist. You can be a Republican or a Democrat. You can be anything and substitute it for faith in the word of God. And if you do that, you are not a Jew, because what you believe is not Judaism. So then you are one of those who say you're a Jew and are not. So there's two groups, those who are not genetically Jews and those who are not by faith Jews. Hopefully I've made that clear enough that we can move on. And we'll go over to our next slide. Next, we took a day off and looked at the Jews in Ukraine and the current Russian invasion. Now we're taking 2 to 4 weeks to look at the final diaspora candidates. The diaspora, that's the expulsion of the Jews from the land of Israel, and that's called the diaspora, the dispersion. And we're looking at the last of the candidates. We've looked at candidates all the way through, the genetic candidates, and we are a little bit stuck on the Ashkenazis, because the Ashkenazis by bloodline are not Jews. But we learned that in Germany, the Ashkenazis had been there, and that area of Germany was known as Ashkenaz. But then Jews who migrated in from Poland, other places in the Middle East, even from Spain, all became known as so I can add another page here. All became known as Ashkenazi because they lived there in the territory of Ashkenaz. See, we don't know if all those who say they are Ashkenazi now, if they are genetically related or not. In the first place, Ashkenazi was not related. That's a son of Japheth. Gomer and then Japheth. Okay. So if they are the original Ashkenazi, then they are not Jews. But genetically, we can't tell yet. We can only break it down to Jewish or non-Jewish. They're working hard to be able to break it down to Israel, Jacob, or someone else in the line. Okay? So when they find that out, then all of those who are known as Ashkenazi can be broken down into, are they Jews or not? Okay. Are they Jews or not? Genetically, we don't know yet. We don't know yet. So that's why we have to and are going to, starting, well, we already have started this week and next week and the following week, we'll determine how we can know which group we can eliminate. What are the two groups? Genetics and faith. Okay. Now we're going to run into a problem with faith that I probably shouldn't introduce at this time, but I will, just because I like to be confusing. Faith in what? What do Jews have to have faith in at the time of the events of the Revelation? Do they have to have faith in the law, the Torah, or do they have to have faith in the Word of God, the Torah of God, Yahushua HaMashiach? Now we know from our studies of Revelation before that the remnant are those who have the testimony of Jesus. Okay, what two things in the book of Revelation identify the remnant, the Jews that are protected? Number one, they keep the law. Number two, they trust in the Messiah. Okay. So the faith group has two aspects. That show up okay? Yeah, that shows up all right. Okay. So that's where we're going to have to go. And then we're also, while we await genetic evidence, we have to go with the other evidence. Are they believers? Are they not? Okay. So let's go ahead and get back to where we were and where we will be. Okay. So now we're taking 2 to 4 weeks to look at the final diaspora candidates, the Russian Jews, the Russian revolutions, and the development of communism, the conversion of secular capitalist Jews into Bolshevism, and how it influenced Zionism, and how it is determining the nature of the secular state of Israel. At the conclusion of that investigation, we'll begin the final stage of our search in the New Testament scriptures. At the time of World War I, the push of the Zionists increased, and at the end of the war, the British presented the Balfour Declaration in 1918. The father of Zionism was Theodor Herzl, and it is revealing to follow his journey to understand the secular nature of Zionism as we have seen it developed in our previous classes. Theodor Herzl was born in 1860, died in 1904. So he was only 44 years old, died of heart condition. He's the founder of the political form of Zionism, a movement to establish a Jewish homeland. His pamphlet, The Jewish State, in 1896, proposed that the Jewish question was a political question to be settled by a World Council of Nations. Okay. Did that happen? Yes. Was it political? Yes. Did God set it up? No. Now there are those who will say that he did, that God directed the British to grant the Jews this homeland, and that God brought all the Jews there. Well, they're about to run out of time. You know, the 1948 thing, they're about to run out of time because first it was 40 years, it was going to be 1988. That didn't work. Okay. Well, all right. There are some passages in the Old Testament that indicate that a generation is 70 years. So that would have been 2018. That didn't work. What do they have left? Well, they really don't have anything as far as that generation, the scripture that talks about that generation. So that was not God setting up Israel. We studied a few lessons ago that God said, I will bring them back. I will go get them and bring them back. We're going to see how that figures in one of the videos that we watched today. He organized, this is Herzl, organized a World Congress of Zionists that met in Basel, Switzerland in August 1897, and he became the first president of the World Zionist Organization, established by the Congress of Zionists. Although Herzl died more than 40 years before the establishment of the State of Israel, he was an indefatigable organizer, propagandist, and diplomat who had much to do with making Zionism into a political movement of worldwide significance. The early years, he was born in a middle-class, well-to-do family. He first studied in a scientific secondary school, but to escape from the anti-Semitic atmosphere, he transferred in 1875 to a school where most of the students were Jews. In 1878, the family moved from Budapest, Hungary at that time, to Vienna, where he entered the University of Vienna to study law. He received his license to practice law in 1884, but chose to devote himself to literature. For a number of years, he was a journalist and a moderately successful playwright. His conversion to Zionism. A profound change began in Herzl's life soon after a sketch he had published in the leading Viennese newspaper, Neue Freie Presse, led to his appointment as the paper's Paris correspondent. He arrived in Paris with his wife in the fall of 1891 and was shocked to find in the homeland of the French Revolution the same anti-Semitism with which he had become so familiar in Austria. He hadn't quite caught on yet that anti-Semitism is a worldwide phenomenon. Hitherto, he had regarded anti-Semitism as a social problem that Jews could overcome only by abandoning their distinctive ways and assimilating to the people among whom they lived. Now, does that go back to my my diagram here about eliminating the faith aspects of Judaism? Yeah, you're going to adopt the ways of the world. God says, your ways are not my ways. Your thoughts are not my thoughts. The world system is anti-God. That's why I just said the anti-Semitism is a worldwide phenomenon. Anywhere the Jews went, they were hated. Do you think that people said, you know, that guy right there, he's a terrible person, I hate him. Oh, look, he's Jewish, I didn't know that. No, they said, he's Jewish, we hate him. Okay? That's the way it worked. It is the zeitgeist of every culture to hate the Jews. Why? Because the world belongs to the prince of this world, Satan, Satan, and his human and spirit kind henchmen make sure that everybody follows along with that same concept of the Jews are bad. At the same time, his work as a newspaperman heightened his interest in and knowledge of social and political affairs and led him to the conviction that the answer to anti-Semitism was not assimilation, that wasn't going to work, but organized counter efforts by the Jews. Remember the passage that started this way back in Samuel? We want a king just like all the other nations, one who will fight our battles and make judgments for us. The Dreyfus affair in France also helped crystallize this belief. French military documents had been given to German agents, and a Jewish officer named Alfred Dreyfus had been falsely charged with the crime. Guess what Alfred Dreyfus was? A Jew, okay? And other officers, probably those who were truly guilty, framed him. The ensuing political controversy produced an outburst of anti-Semitism among the French public. Herzl said in later years that it was the Dreyfus affair that had made a Zionist out of him. So long as anti-Semitism existed, assimilation would be impossible, and the only solution for the majority of Jews would be organized emigration to a state of their own. Now, what have we seen in our previous lessons up to this time? They all thought if we assimilate into the culture in which we live, and the rich Jews were able to do that. They were accepted in high positions of authority and society and economics. But even then, they were turned upon and hated and killed, beaten, or expelled from those countries. So Herzl is the one who really vocalized in a broad sense, a worldwide sense, that that assimilation was not going to work for Jews, even though it was certainly going to destroy their Judaism. It wasn't going to work for keeping them out of physical harm. So long as anti-Semitism existed, assimilation would be impossible, and the only solution for the majority of Jews would be organized emigration to a state of their own. Herzl was not the first to conceive of a Jewish state. Orthodox Jews had traditionally invoked the return to Zion in their daily prayers. Of course, their daily prayers were that the Messiah would come and take them to Zion. In 1799, Napoleon had thought of establishing a Jewish state in the ancient lands of Israel. The English statesman Benjamin Disraeli, a Jew, had written a Zionist novel, Tancred. Moses Hess, a friend and co-worker of Karl Marx, had published an important book, Rome und Jerusalem, in 1862, in which he declared the restoration of a Jewish state a necessity both for the Jews and for the rest of humanity. Thought it interesting that he was a friend and co-worker of Marx, the head of communism. Among the Jews of Russia and Eastern Europe, a number of groups were engaged in trying to settle immigrants in agricultural colonies in Palestine. Palestine, that's the area, that's the Levant, that's the area where Israel is now and was in the past. After the Russian pogroms of 1881, pogroms are the attempt to wipe out the Jews. Leo Pinsker had written a pamphlet called Auto-Emancipation, an appeal to Western European Jews to assist in the establishment of colonies in Palestine. So you see that was several years before Herzl came out with his stuff. When Herzl read it some years later, he commented in his diary that if he had known of it, he might have never written The Jewish State. He wouldn't have had to. This was already been accomplished. Herzl's first important Zionist effort was an interview with Baron Maurice de Hirsch, one of the wealthiest men of his time. He was a Frenchman, and he had founded the Jewish Colonization Association with the aim of settling Jews from Russia and Romania in Argentina and other parts of the Americas. The 35-year-old journalist, this is Herzl, arrived at the Baron's mansion in Paris with 22 pages of notes in which he argued the need for a political organization to rally the Jews under a flag of their own, rather than leaving everything to the philanthropic endeavors of individuals like the Baron. It needs to be done politically. The conversation was notable for its effect on Herzl rather than on the Baron de Hirsch, who refused to hear him out. It led to Herzl's famous pamphlet, The Jewish State, published in February of 1896 in Vienna. The Jewish question, he wrote, was not a social or religious question, but a national question that could be solved only by making it a, quote, political world question to be discussed and settled by the civilized nations of the world in council. Was Herzl a religious Jew? No. Was he a secular Jew? Okay. And probably would not have been called an atheistic Jew, but was very close. Some of Herzl's friends thought it a mad idea, but the pamphlet won favorable response from Eastern European Zionist societies. In June 1896, when Herzl was en route to Constantinople, Istanbul, in the hope of talking to the Ottoman Sultan about obtaining the grant of Palestine as an independent country, going to Constantinople, get the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire to give them the grant of Palestine as an independent country. His train stopped in Sofia, Bulgaria, and hundreds of Jews were present at the station to greet Herzl and to hail him as a leader. Do you think political Zionism was popular early? Yeah, these people were being beaten, murdered, losing their businesses, all kinds of things. They wanted a way out. Now you know why the scriptures say in the Jewish section that the love of money is the root of many types of evil. Although he remained in Constantinople for 11 days, he failed to reach the Sultan. But he had begun the career as organizer and propagandist that would end only with his death 8 years later. The first Zionist Congress. Herzl went to London in an effort to organize the Jews there in support of his program. Not all the Jewish leaders in England were happy to see him because his political approach was not in tune with their ideas. So who are these Jewish leaders in England? They were religious Jews. His political approach was not in tune with their ideas. But at public meetings in the East End, he was loudly cheered. He was a tall, impressive figure with a long black beard and the mien of a prophet. Despite his personal magnetism, he found that his efforts to influence Jewish leaders in England were of little avail, and therefore he decided to organize a World Congress of Zionists in the hope of winning support from the masses of Jews in all countries. He proposed to hold the Congress in Munich, but as the Jews there, who were mostly assimilated, opposed it, he settled upon Basel, Switzerland. The Congress met at the end of August in 1897, was attended by about 200 delegates, mostly from Central and Eastern Europe and Russia, along with a few from Western Europe and even the United States. They represented all social strata and every variety of Jewish thought, from Orthodox Jews to atheists and from businessmen to students. There were also several hundred onlookers, including some sympathetic Christians and reporters for the international press. When Herzl's imposing figure came to the podium, there was tumultuous applause. He said, "We want to lay the foundation stone," he declared. He really didn't, did he? Who is the foundation stone? Yahushua is the foundation stone, not a political system. For the house which will become the refuge of the Jewish nation. Zionism is the return to Judaism even before the return to the land of Israel. So what kind of Zionism, what kind of Judaism would it be? Non-trusting, non-faithful Judaism. One of Herzl's most faithful supporters was the writer Max Nordau, who gave a brilliant address in which he described the plight of the Jews in the East and in the West. The three-day Congress agreed upon a program henceforth to be known as the Basel Program, declaring Zionism's aspiration to create a publicly guaranteed homeland for the Jewish people. Publicly guaranteed homeland. What kind of homeland would you want if you were a Jewish people? A Messiah guaranteed homeland. It also set up the Zionist organization with Herzl as president. Later accomplishments, the 7 remaining years of his life were devoted to furtherance of the Zionist cause, although he remained literary editor of the New Free Presse in order to earn a living. He established a Zionist newspaper, Die Welt, published as a German language weekly in Vienna. He negotiated unsuccessfully with the Sultan of Turkey for the grant of a charter that would allow Jewish mass settlement in Palestine on an autonomous basis. He then turned to Great Britain, which seemed favorable to the establishment of a Jewish settlement in British territory in the Sinai Peninsula, right close to home, okay? The old home. When this project failed, the British proposed Uganda in East Africa. This offer, which he and some other Zionists were willing to accept, aroused violent opposition at the Zionist Congress of 1903, particularly among the Russian Jews. Herzl was unable to resolve the conflict. Well, it doesn't seem, and it's the reason that there was such violent opposition, is that if you're gonna be a Jew, you need to be a Jew where the Messiah is going to come back at least. Even if you're not going to let the Messiah bring you back to that place, you want to be there when he comes. It doesn't say anywhere in any of the Old Testament prophets that Jesus is coming to Uganda. Okay? Not going there. Okay? He died of a heart ailment at Edlock near Vienna at the age of 44. He was buried in Vienna, but in accordance with his wish, his remains were removed to Jerusalem in 1949 after the and entombed on a hill west of the city known now as Mount Herzl. The Balfour Declaration, we mentioned that earlier, issued through the continued efforts of Chaim Weizmann and Nahum Sokolow, Zionist leaders in London, fell short of the expectations of the Zionists, who would ask for the reconstitution of Palestine as the Jewish national home. No Uganda for them, okay? They didn't want Uganda. The Balfour Declaration, 1917, November 2nd, a statement of British support for the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. It was made in a letter from Arthur James Balfour, the British Foreign Secretary, to Lionel Walter Rothschild, second Baron Rothschild of Tring, a leader of the Anglo-Jewish community. Lionel Walter Rothschild, second Baron Rothschild, born 1868 in London, England, died in 1937, a British zoologist who became a great collector and founded the Rothschild Natural History Museum in London. The eldest son of Nathan Meyer Rothschild, the first Baron Rothschild, he received his titles on the death of his father in 1915. He served as a conservative member of parliament from 1899 to 1910. In 1917, because of his Zionist sympathies and his eminent position in the Anglo-Jewish community, he received a letter from Arthur James, later Lord Balfour, then British Foreign Secretary, declaring the British government's interest in establishing in Palestine a national home for the Jewish people. This letter became known as the Balfour Declaration. Now, if you read it this way, it's like the British said, hey, we really want to do this for the Jews, right? That it was their idea. Well, we're going to find out about that. A descendant of the powerful Jewish Rothschild banking family, Walter Rothschild was a Zionist and a close friend of Chaim Weizmann. Though he retired from parliament by 1910, he remained active as a figurehead of the British Jewish community and served as the president of the English Zionist Federation. He was the recipient of the Balfour Declaration letter from Balfour. In the summer of 1917, Arthur Balfour asked Rothschild and Weizmann to draft a statement that would be in line with Zionist goals. You see, Weizmann and Rothschild wrote the Balfour Declaration. The original draft sent by Rothschild to Balfour proposed that, quote, Palestine should be reconstituted as the national home of the Jewish people, close quote. But following objections within the cabinet, the wording was made more vague. The declaration specifically stipulated that, quote, nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, close quote. The document, however, said nothing of the political or national rights of these communities and did not refer to them by name. See, it was left vague to please everybody. The Arab population of Palestine and the Zionist Jews who wanted Palestine. Nevertheless, the declaration aroused an enthusiastic hope among Zionists and seemed the fulfillment of the aims of the World Zionist Organization. His lobbying efforts alongside Weizmann and other Zionists, both within and outside of the British government, was central in pressuring the government to issue the declaration. It was not their idea originally. They were pressured into it by the Rothschilds, the banking gurus, kings, and kingmakers of Europe and England. Right? And so the pressure of the financial Rothschilds helped to get this accomplished. This is Walter. He's a handsome man and got a great hat. This is the letter that Balfour wrote to him. I have much pleasure in conveying to you on behalf of His Majesty's government the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to and approved by the cabinet. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. I should be grateful if you would bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation. Yours sincerely, Arthur James Balfour. And his signature is there, but kind of hard to read. All right. Now we'll move into post-World War I Russia and the beginning of Satan's penultimate stage to produce the final blasphemy of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. I see this. Let's see if I can give you one last diagram before the break. God, I was going to say one last diagram. And that's why. Okay. See, now you've ruined my train of thought. I have considered and hopefully transmitted to you through the lessons that we started here in 70 AD, and we took the Jewish people on all of these adventures so that every stop along the way, they became less and less faithful to God and more faithful to the Jews of Samuel that said, we want a king like the other nations. We want protection. We want power. We want to be able to do things our way without interference. And do you remember what God said to Samuel? He said, give it to him. Give him a king, because they're not rejecting you. They are rejecting me as their what? King. Who was speaking to Samuel? The pre-incarnate Yahushua HaMashiach, Jesus. They're rejecting me as their king by wanting another king. They were rejecting the Messiah. And all the way through here, at every one of these points of more and more secularism, less and less religious faith. And you know how I use the word religion. Typically, religion is a bad thing, but you know, it's a generic term also. And where is he leading them for the final preparation? for Satan's final preparation. Russia. Russia. Because what's going to happen in Russia? Well, it's got to have a couple of revolutions and institute Bolshevik communism. Bolshevik communism. Because communism is the socialist system under dictatorship. And who's going to be the dictator in the book of Revelation before the coming of the Messiah? The Antichrist, the anti-king, the one that they have rejected. So this is their preparation for what I consider to be the final preparation, and we'll see that it comes true by the people who establish the state of Israel, and it's what they do, the things they do, and the things that they say, and who are elected as these leaders. It's just, it will blow your mind. All right, we got a couple of minutes, and so I'm going to go ahead and introduce with this slide the next section. Now we will move into post-World War I Russia and the beginning of Satan's penultimate stage to produce the final blasphemy of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. So we will be working with this one, The Birth of Modern Jewish Politics. Hello. And that's where we'll pick up after our break. So we'll be back here at 11:15. Don't think we're going to get all of our videos in since I had that delay at the beginning, trying to get everything connected. Worked out pretty well, but it's not everything I wanted. And we're going to have to worry about the audio. So before we start recording next hour, I'm going to play with the volume and see if we can get it so you all can hear it sufficiently without any background noise or anything, which means that the church dogs will have to behave. Okay, let's pray and we'll take our break. Father Yahua, we are seeing the plan of the enemy as they attempt to remove your established king for their own king. And we wish to understand how this plays and what our role is in understanding and in disseminating this kind of information. We ask that you bless what we've studied and bless what we're studying next hour in the name of your King, Yahushua HaMashiach, Jesus, our Savior. Amen. We're going to look at the birth of modern Jewish politics from Dr.
Hello,
Abramson.
and welcome to another episode of Jewish History Lab. Today, I'd like to spend some time talking about the birth of modern Jewish politics, which is really a phenomenon that we see appearing in the late 19th century. Now, obviously,
I think that's going to be better right there. There we go.
hello, and welcome to another episode of Jewish History Lab. Today, I'd like to spend some time talking about the birth of modern Jewish politics, which is really a phenomenon that we see appearing in the late 19th century. Now, obviously, that seems ridiculously late in the sense that, as long as there have been more than one Jew, there have been politics, right? It's just part of the nature of the Jewish experience, I think, and possibly of the human experience in general. But what I'm going to be focusing in on in this context is the idea of the birth of mass movements with political ideologies that are adopted by Jews, particularly in the modern era, especially because this is a time when democracy begins to make its impact on the Jewish community, and in particular, the great mass of population that resides in Eastern Europe, where there's so many more Jews to create that critical mass to move political agendas along. And prior to the 1880s, by and large, Jews were quiescent when it came to political activity. They largely trusted their leadership to have any kind of interface with the secular authorities. And so really it was a matter of more kind of like feudal relationships where the Stadlan, the intercessor that would be hired by the head of the Kehillah, would be the one that would be interacting with the nobleman or the king or whatever on behalf of the entire community. And the idea of a group of Jews breaking away from the central authorities was really quite unusual and doesn't have a long tradition before the modern era. In the modern era, however, for a variety of reasons, Jews begin to look at more, contemporary ways of organizing themselves and not necessarily in conformity with the will of the rabbinic and communal leadership. And that's where we get these modern Jewish politics. So let's have a look at that specifically. I think we can date the major important turning point in the development of modern Jewish politics to 1881. That is the date upon which Tsar Alexander II was assassinated, shown here with his son and with his wife. He was a very popular Tsar in Eastern Europe. He was the great Tsar liberator because it was on his watch that the serfs were liberated. It was definitely not a complete solution like the emancipation of Africans in America. It was not a funded emancipation, like they went from one set of difficulties to another set of difficulties, but nevertheless, the Russian populace as a whole tended to regard him favorably. The ones who did not, in particular, were the revolutionaries, the early socialist movements that were burgeoning in the 1870s. And in 1881, a group of them, organized under the name Narodnya Volya, the People's Will, tossed a bomb at his carriage and killed him, as you can see in these contemporary newspaper accounts of that act of violence. The rumor went out throughout the empire that the new emperor, the son, Alexander III, gave the populace permission to beat the Jews for 3 days. Now, for a long time, Jewish historiography basically took this at some kind of face value. And if you've seen Fiddler on the Roof, there's that famous scene where Tevye is approached by a policeman who wants to give him some kind of heads up that a pogrom is coming. But it seems like this is not an accurate depiction of what happened in Russia. In reality, the pogroms went way out of control. The Russian Empire and the government was certainly not the architects of the violence. They had a great difficulty trying to control them. The entire administration, the police force, was exposed as being, inept, excessively bureaucratic, too slow to respond to this rapid movement of violence that essentially followed the newly laid rail lines that were connecting many communities. And the pogroms went on not for 3 days, but for 3 years till 1884. And it really underscored the fact that Russia was no longer capable of maintaining itself as a Rechtsstaat, that is, a country governed by law. There was simply too much anarchy possible, too much chaos possible, and that is really something that the Jews as a minority fear tremendously. So it is the violence that erupted in 1881 and extended for a few years that really triggered the rethinking by Jews of their political status, or ethnic populations that were minorities in a particular region, like Poles in Ukrainian territory and vice versa, things like that. And it was something that really just got way out of hand for the Russians. Now, this map and the few charts that I'd like to show you right now come from a really interesting article. It was published in 2019 by Irena Grosfeld, Sehun Sorkan-Sakale, and Ekaterina Zhuravskaya that point out something that really should be fairly obvious, but no one else, to my knowledge, has really made these correlations. the pogroms, why did they happen? So there's definitely a certain amount of latent anti-Semitism in traditional society, and we can tie it to, certain church teachings and certain economic practices of the Jews, and the long-term resentment that goes back to the Khmelnytsky rebellion, the Haidamach rebellion, and so on. But Jews basically lived in relative peace alongside their Ukrainian, Polish, Lithuanian, Latvian, and Russian neighbors, with only a few significant punctuations of violence, like under Khmelnytsky in the 17th century and under Junta in the 18th century. So the majority of Jewish history in the Pale Settlement was relatively peaceful, not necessarily loving, but one of coexistence. So why all these pogroms all of a sudden? So have a look at these charts. Let me just move over to the other side of the screen here. So this is a chart that shows the number of pogroms in the years 1800 to 1928. And I'm a little bit suspicious of the last number because I always thought there was a much bigger surge in 1919, but let's take it at face value for now because the conclusions are going to be really useful. Here is the number of pogroms correlated with years of crop failure. And as you can see, yes, pogroms do correlate with certain periods of crop failure, but by no means all periods of crop failure. There are some periods when, terrible crop situation, especially from before 1881, that do not result in anti-Jewish violence. And in fact, there's a rather extended period before the Russian Revolution in 1917 where there's no violence to speak of. So what's going on there? Then if you look at a different kind of factor, political turmoil, the same kind of thing holds. Yes, those periods of violence against Jews in 1881 and in 1904-05, of course, the Kishinev pogrom and the Civil War pogroms, they coincided with significant political upheaval, but lots of periods where you had political upheaval and no violence against Jews. So what's going on? So what the authors of this study did, which was very clever, is they put together both of those variables with violence against Jews, and this is the money chart right here. Wow, look at this. The purple lines demonstrate that when there is a combination of political turmoil and crop failure, that is a disastrous time for anti-Jewish violence, meaning those two factors joined together have a direct correlation with violence against Jews. And I think this says a lot about the fundamental working pieces that motivate people to attack their neighbors in this circumstance. Okay, let's go to the political thing. So under these circumstances, right, you've got 3 years of chaos in the former Russian Empire. And Jews are basically saying, nothing's working here. We've been relying on our traditional leadership for a long time. We're very disappointed with how they handled, among other things, the Kantonisten crisis that we discussed in a previous video. We have to do something different. And so basically, Jews decided en masse that they were going to use 5 distinct strategies to meet the moment. Here they are. The first is actually the most traditional of all, that is emigration, right? That historically, when conditions are growing increasingly poor for Jews in a particular region, and they see no easy way to change it, so they pick up and they move somewhere else. This is a 2,000-year-old tested strategy that has worked fairly well. And so you can see from this map, which we've looked at in other contexts, a large outpouring of Jews from the Pale of Settlement to America, to Canada, the United States of America, to Canada, to South America, 250,000 to Western Europe, significant numbers of Jews to the land of Israel and to South Africa, and a small number going all the way out to Australia. This most traditional strategy ultimately doesn't solve the problem. It just hopes that it will be better somewhere else, and it could in fact become worse, as we shall see as we move into the 20th century in Western Europe in particular. The second major strategy says, no, we're not going to leave this country. We're going to change this country. And that is this refers to the widespread adoption of socialist ideas by many Jewish youth, in particular during this time. Here's a mugshot of Leon Trotsky, one of the most important Jewish socialist leaders of the period. He was the mastermind behind the 1905 wildcat strike that ultimately forced the Russian government to change its way of operation. And what it's called the 1905 revolution. It really wasn't a revolution because the Tsar was still in power, but he had to cede more authority to a revised parliament. What is not as well known about Trotsky's personal problems with the Russian Empire is that in 1905 it was virtually impossible to get a decent haircut anywhere in the Russian Empire. So anyways, Jewish socialism. This was something that was antithetical to traditional Jewish values, primarily because socialism, following the ideas of Karl Marx, who was himself born Jewish and baptized as a child by his parents, was rather anti-Semitic himself, a self-hating Jew, and he had lots of terrible things to say about religion in particular and Jews as well. So the socialists tend to have a very anti-religious, anti-clerical position, and so it did not represent the mass of the Jewish population, but there was definitely a segment of the younger population who felt like socialism, although it represented a radical break from Jewish culture and thought and so on, nevertheless represented the way forward for a more enlightened society. We'll continue with this, God willing, in the next video. Thirdly, rather than saying, let's emigrate and hope it gets better someplace else, rather than saying, let's not emigrate, let's try and change the country here, the third strategy is Zionism, saying, let's emigrate, but we'll emigrate for the last time. We'll emigrate back to our national homeland in the land of Israel, and we will there reestablish a Jewish polity, a Jewish state, a Jewish army, a Jewish flag, Jewish passports, and so on. And this will be representative of some kind of secular messianic ideal where it will represent the end of time, because Jews will no longer wander from one place to another. Here is an image of the first prime minister of Israel, David Ben-Gurion, with the large picture of Theodor Herzl, the founder of political Zionism in the background, proclaiming the independence of Israel in 1948. So this was also a very, very popular option that many young Jews in particular gravitated to, even though, like socialism, most of the traditional rabbinate and leadership opposed it, saying that it was kind of like a chutzpah, an act of insolence towards God, in the sense that, returning to Israel is part of the messianic future. And by, forcing God's hand, by moving to Israel and is trying to establish a state before the Messiah arrived, that was considered, almost heretical to some rabbis. And therefore, this also represented a break from tradition. The fourth option was the least popular, but nevertheless had a significant impact ideologically. This is the notion of diaspora nationalism that said essentially, okay, we're not going to leave, no immigration. We're not going to change this society to become socialist. That's such a radical change. We're not going to do that. We are also not going to move to Israel, which actually, according to the diaspora nationalists, sort of represented a step backwards in terms of the evolution of the Jewish people, because as the founding ideologue of diaspora nationalism argued, the Jews had sort of advanced beyond the stage of needing a political state to constitute their own identity. That Jews were capable of perpetuating their culture and thought as a minority scattered throughout the world. So to go and say, oh, we want to create a state somewhere, whether it's in Israel or Uganda or anywhere, that represents, looking backwards for the diaspora nationalists. And where they had a limited amount of impact in Eastern Europe, their ideas were actually implemented very briefly in Ukraine, and then for slightly longer periods in the interwar states of Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. Everything came to a crashing halt with World War II. A version of diaspora nationalism, however, survives in the institution of the Jewish Federation, which is kind of like this loose agglomeration of Jewish groups around the country to collectively raise money for charity, to represent Jewish interests before democratic governments and so on. The huge difference between the way the diaspora nationalists envisioned their thought of how to deal with modernity. And the way the Jewish Federation works is that the Jewish Federation is entirely voluntary, meaning a person can choose to identify as a Jew, affiliate with the community, or not. That's, modernity doesn't really demand that you have to fit into a particular box. The diaspora nationalists had a vision where Jews would actually be in a fixed group. They would pay a certain amount of communal taxes to their own leadership. They would have the rights as a group to draw on state resources for communal practices. They would have a certain amount of protection in terms of, not having elections on Shabbat and things like that. But it was a much more kind of like a well-structured organization than the Jewish Federation, which is essentially a volunteer organization. However powerful and effective it is, it ultimately depends on people wanting to belong to it, which was not the case with diaspora nationalists. And finally, the last national strategy to deal with the evolution of Jewish life in a modern democratic area are the so-called by me anyways, renewed traditionalists. These are Jews who really are still in many ways thinking to the pre-modern era of traditional Torah leadership, definitely very much an orthodox kind of way of thinking. And they're saying, wait a minute, why are Jews organizing politically? We should be investing much more energy in our religious activities. We should be focusing on things we need as religious Jews. However, given the rapid advance of democratizing movements in Europe and the promise of a democratic Russian empire, which turned out, not to work out that way, but at least not in the 20th century, at least not the beginning of the 20th century. We'll talk about that later as well, God willing. They said, you know what? If we don't organize politically like these other non-religious movements, then we will lose an opportunity to express the voice of religious Jewry, which represents a very large proportion over the overall Jewish public. And so the renewed traditionalists, with parties like Agudas Yisrael, Agudas Achim, and several other groups, they essentially tried to promote a religious agenda, that really demanded things specifically for religious observance within this new democratic or proto-democratic environment, okay? Those are the 5 basic strategies that Jews chose from. There are lots of shadings in between them. Let's just have a look at what they look like on a political spectrum. And essentially, I'm going to be reviewing the material in the last group of slides, but we will be putting it in a graphic format so it's a little bit easier to understand. So here you go. Here's a typical political spectrum, the way we would study it in American political science or things like that. You have a line, and on the left you have socialism, and on the right you have capitalism, right? If you think about American politics, at least until recent years, you could say that Democrats would be just slightly left of center, Republicans would be just slightly right of center, but basically they're really close to the middle. Jewish politics are not like that. There you can have really wide ranges of extremes between them. But Jewish politics is not so simple that we could all live on just one spectrum. In fact, a second axis has to be added, and this relates to the question of doakite, which means basically here-ness. Do we believe, political parties or political organizations would argue, in developing Jewish life here, in the diaspora, or do we believe in doing it dort, over there, meaning in Israel? Are we more Zionist inclined than diaspora inclined? So every party has to fit on both of these X and Y axes. If we look in the lower left quadrant where you have socialism and doakite, the most important party is the General Jewish Workers Bund, B-U-N-D, that was actually one of the earliest parties to form illegally in the Russian Empire in 1897. It actually claimed a very large number of followers. It was essentially a very leftist agenda that was exercised in the Yiddish language, largely because there was a significant population of blue-collar workers in northern Pale of Settlement, Lithuania in particular, that were very receptive to socialist thinking. And so the Bund really relied on the Jewish proletariat, which was quite significant, particularly in the more industrialized north. By the time you get to the 1917 revolution, there were 30,000 card-carrying members of the Bund. Now, backing up, what about in the quadrant to the lower right? You see that we have this man, Shimon Dubno, who represents the diaspora nationalists, right? They're definitely very big on Doakite. They did not favor the idea of moving to Israel, but they didn't think that the country had to be so radically changed on a socialist agenda. So they're really more existing within a capitalist economic framework. Now, if we go up to the top right quadrant, we have, of course, very important group, the Zionists. And there are many, many shades of Zionist interpretations, but the most significant one was the group that was founded by Theodor Herzl, shown here, the father of modern political Zionism, who in 1897, same year as the Bund, had the General World Zionist Congress. And the movement that he was associated with called the Allgemeine Zionisten, the General Zionists. It was more of a big tent, large umbrella kind of Zionism. This is contrasted from the revisionists, who are up here, sort of like more extreme Israel, more extreme, not necessarily capitalist economically, but definitely in a kind of political sense. Vladimir Jabotinsky is the most important thinker and activist among the revisionists. And they essentially believed that Herzl was far too diplomatic, that he was far too trusting in the goodwill of the nations that surrounded Israel or the great powers. You know, they felt that Herzl's approach, which was basically a kind of shuttle diplomacy, go here, talk to this important leader, go there, talk to that important leader, and eventually you'll negotiate through and we'll get Israel. Jabotinsky and his followers felt that no, Jews must be much more aggressive. They must be much more militarily trained. They should have more of a kind of a right-wing outlook. These two approaches of Herzl and Jabotinsky essentially formed the core of the political party Likud later when Israel became a state. Finally, if you move over here to the upper left quadrant, you have a very important movement, the Poalei Zion, the workers of Zion, who were definitely very aggressively Zionist, but they felt that it would be a shame if Israel would just be a reproduction of some Western European state. They wanted Israel to be established on socialist principles. They invested heavily in kibbutzim, collective farms, the sort of ideal of the Israeli-born Sabra, who, you know, has a rifle on his back and is hoeing the land and is draining the swamps and things like that. That's kind of like the ideal of Poalei Zion. And this movement is primarily responsible for the core of the Labor Party that dominated much of early Israeli politics. So if you think this is complicated so far, we're not even finished yet, because Jews are not satisfied with two political axes. We have to have a third axis, right? We have X, we have Y, and now we have Z, which is kind of like a third dimension. I'll draw that with sort of like this curved green line. And this represents the religious parties, because up until now, all of these groups have been either anti-religious or neutral on religion. That leaves out a huge number of Jews who still held religious values, and traditional Judaism was sacred to them, and they did not want to, you know, abandon its dictates. So the first group we'll look at are the so-called Mizrahi. These are Orthodox Jews who believe that, contrary to the dominant rabbinic opinion, that somehow working alongside secular Zionists to establish a modern state represented an abrogation of divine will, maybe that was precisely what God wanted. That maybe the coming together of secular Jews for the holy purpose of rebuilding Israel, in fact, represented the gradual unfolding of the messianic ideal. They followed in large part the teachings of this individual, Rabbi Abraham Isaac Kook, who was a brilliant scholar who lived in Israel and was a very profound Zionist. Although he was not specifically politically motivated, he didn't lead the party or anything like that, but he was kind of like the ideological founder of many of the ideas that were encapsulated in Mizrahi. And then finally, I am actually saying finally for real right now, We also have those traditionalist Jews, the renewed traditionalists, who did not agree that Zionism should be embraced by religious Jews. And furthermore, they certainly disagreed with everybody on the left side of this spectrum who were anti-religion or at least neutral on religion. They wanted to embrace religion. So these were the groups like the Agudat Yisrael that basically decided to organize themselves in order to defend the rights and opinions of religious Jews. Among their many great achievements are the Siyum Hashas, the Daf Yomi program, which I'm very proud to participate in myself. I do give a little 2 to 5 minute class on every single page of the Talmud, 2,711 folios that over the course of a 7-year cycle, the students of the Talmud complete the entire corpus of the Babylonian Talmud. This is the most recent celebration of the completion of another cycle that was held all over the world. This happens to be a meeting at the MetLife Stadium. I was actually present at this particular celebration. So that's kind of like the things that Agudat Yisrael does. They think about, what do yeshiva students need? What do kollel families need? And they're all sort of like working in politics in order to defend that sort of traditionalism. So that's a graphic representation of how these political orientations developed and relate to each other. It's complicated, I know, but as my father, Oliver Shalom, would always say, Henry, it just gets worse. Okay, I hope you found this enjoyable and enlightening. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. It's really nice to see that lots more people are interested in studying Jewish history. And if you don't want to miss a lecture, make sure you click on the little bell button on your YouTube so that it'll give you a notification. Hey, a new video is happening or a new premiere is happening where we can actually communicate in real time with the chat. And of course, we have other levels of membership, which give you access to other lectures and live events, things like that. But I'm really happy that you're with me for this video, and I look forward to speaking to you in the next.
Okay, I'm going to leave this chart up. We don't really have enough time to get into a whole other video. I'll save that for next week. But I thought I'd point out some things here. If you look at, trying to find a good way to do this since I cannot write on my screen like I could if it was on my iPad. If you look at the here, there, y-axis, to the left of that, he only has the one group who were essentially the Labor Party, the Socialist Party, who were Zionist but socialist. To their right, on the right-hand side of that line, is the Herzl group. Over the years, the Herzl group has migrated more to the left, more socialist. That's if you read comments by the people looking at current events in Israel, you'll find that their primary complaint is that socialism is overtaking religious practice, orthodoxy, even though the Orthodox are not very religious, as we saw previously in our charts that we've looked at. So the overall movement of Israel, state of Israel, has gone to the left, and the lower right-hand corner are the only real, if you think about it, from what he has said, they're the only religious group in all of them. The only pro-Israel religion group of all of the various parties in Israel, and they're a very minor party and have very little power, very little that they can say. I'm going to take a second here, and I'm going to plug in a speaker. And I'm going to turn the volume down on that speaker. What I'm doing is trying to play for next time. So let's see if I can make anything work here just for the next video, which I probably should wait on because we're not really going to do another video today, but I can't wait any longer to find out if I have a way of fixing it. No, not that way. Okay. All right. Well, let me get rid of these things. Let's go back to what we have seen is the near destruction of Jewish faith in Yahua to set the stage for an essentially atheistic Jewish religious state, a non-religious atheistic Jewish state, the abandonment of relying on Hashem, God, the name, to regather the Jews under the Messiah and establish the Messianic kingdom by switching to human effort to establish their own perfect kingdom. If you've noticed, they all want to make it perfect in some way. And next week, we'll see the history of Jewish leadership in Israel. We'll see Yitzhak Rabin and Golda Meir and early people in the establishment of the Jewish state. And we will see what kind of people they were. I think it will be shocking to you to see who was eventually given leadership in the state of Israel, despite their activities in the development, establishment of the state of Israel. So let's close with a word of prayer, and we'll close up for this week. And I promise that by next week, I'll have everything working, because you know me, I'm an expert at this stuff. So I'll have it all working just fine. Actually, I'm going to make Jonah sit out here and fix it all. And I'm going to make my wife come out here and watch. Okay, so let's pray, and then we'll close for today. Father Yahweh, we are grateful for your love for us, for your love for your remnant of Israel. We pray for the remnant of Israel. We know that you have kept for yourself in every generation those who are faithful to you. We know the persecution that they face by the enemies of your faith and by the enemies inside of the state of Israel, who also mistreat them and are prejudiced against them. So we pray for them. We pray for any of your remnant in Ukraine, that you might keep them safe and build their faith through the testing that they're going through. We pray for those of us found in Christendom who have faith in you and a love for your King, the future King of Israel, and our Savior, Jesus Christ, in whose name we pray. Amen.